Welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday yachting luncheons. And it's so scenic to look out our windows. You can almost see the Golden Gate Bridge. This is not called fog. This is white sunshine out our windows right now. Let's see a little bit about future speakers. And we're happy right off the bat to welcome our Rear Commodore. So Kenny, why don't you come up and welcome the crowd? Kenny's going to eat right now. He's not going to welcome the crowd. Well, welcome on behalf of Kenny to the St. Francis Yacht Club. We're happy to have you here. Rear Commodore Kenny Glideware. Kenny, hand up for a smile. You want to come by on September the 12th. If you've raced in the Big Boat Series, as some of us have, for decades, you want to talk to Daniel Forrester, who makes a living photographing the beauty and the beast of sailboat racing around the world. Daniel is incredibly renowned. He's one of the top yachting photographers in the world. In the two cups that I worked for Bill Koch in 92 and 95, Daniel Forrester was literally omnipresent. He was like the oxygen. Everywhere you looked, there was Daniel taking incredible pictures. So he gets inside the game, and he'll be here to talk his sport and what he calls, how to make a living doing exactly what you want to do. On September the 5th, Rich Jeppesen, co-founder of Olympic Circle Sailing Club, will be here to talk all about what he says, making a living doing exactly what you love. So they'll have parallel motivations and different paths to that goal. You may not know that after World War II, and actually a couple of wars since, when bombers return to base, it's too dangerous for them to land with all the bombs on board. Not only could it blow up the plane they're in, but blow up the whole air base. And so a whole pattern, best practice has been established for decades, where the bombers drop their munitions, get this, in bays and estuaries as they approach the airfield. So this underwater danger, these underwater munitions, is now a worldwide field of discovery and recovery. And one of the authorities in that world, Chris Welch, will be here to talk about it on August 22nd. Underwater munition dumping, bigger than banning straws in the oceans, as he would say. Also, you want to come by on August 15th to hear Joe Pratt talk about the feasibility of operating zero-emission marine vessels. Joe is at the forefront of that field. He's the CEO of Golden Gate Zero Emissions, and he'll be here to talk all about the energy. We're seeing Priuses and electric cars all around on the roads. He's going to talk about the same revolution happening in water. And next week, August the 8th, renowned naturalist Michael Ellis will be here to talk all about his most recent trip to Africa. He always brings out the best of his subject, and you'll see Africa really like never before. I've seen a preview of his show, and it's a complete knockout. Now, a little bit about today's speaker. She started sailing at age 7, and she hails from our sound has gone away, Bob Sky. Okay, so she hails from none other than Fremont, and at age 7, her family bought a little 26-foot sailboat, trailered it up to Alameda, and they'd go sailing all the time. By age 11, one of the family's most favorite activities was to sail their boat, called Surprise, on camping trips in the Bay Area, which is a fun way to begin sailing. At age 12, the hook was really set when her brother, not she, but her brother, got an El Toro. She was denied owning a boat. Now, we talk often about what sets the hook with lifelong sailors, but I bet that had a lot to do with it. She went on to Cal State Sacramento to get a BA in accounting and English. She put both of those to work, getting a JD and an MBA at USC. And by age 26, she was teaching sailing in Mexico. She sails, and to this very day, she started sailing Hobies and then Knockers. If you sail the Knocker, and I have, they're incredibly fast ride. And then, of course, PHRF boats of all sorts. And then she started racing in the Far 40 circuit, including racing twice in the World Championships in 2014 here and in 2015. That second year, they won the Corinthian division, the amateur division of the World Championships. She's a business strategist. Get this, she's an accountant, a lawyer, a business strategist, and as you're going to learn, she's quite a good sailor. She also has a 100-ton master's license to sail big ships at sea. Please welcome an authority in lot and a sailor to us, Christine Parakis. Christine.
Do we have a working stick now? Excellent. Oh, this isn't at the beginning, though. Okay. Nothing like starting at the beginning, huh? I've been around a lot of years, as you can tell from just that story, and it certainly adds up.
Christine, you got to stand behind the podium or you won't be on TV.
I wasn't planning to stand behind the podium.
Carry the mic with you.
Well, I want to, but Tom's not going to let me move.
That's because you're not going to move the mic either. Tip the mic down. Thank you, Christine.
I'm a lot shorter than that mic. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Close the mic up to her. Close the mic up to her.
All right, I need to have a little space here. Is that okay, Tom? All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate the warm welcome, and hello to Tom's audience as well, who are out in the ethers. And yes, it's true, I had to fight my way onto boats as a young girl, and I have been very passionate about sailing, and so much so that getting my 100-ton license for me was a mastery of something that I loved so much, and also would give me options. I have a 46-foot Moody that resides in Los Angeles, and it's a blue water cruiser, and my dream since I was a child was to sail around the world. And setting up my home in the British Virgin Islands after doing all of those things was a part of putting pieces together of making my world smaller and more accessible to me, and really a dream come true. So I have always been committed to creating in all my professional endeavors a sense of safety and support for the people that I work with and my businesses and my clients. And when my earliest childhood memory was when I was 3 years old and I was accused of stealing oranges. So this is a pervading thing. It didn't matter how amazing my parents are, and I'm so honored to have them here. My parents are here joining us today. They will be married 64 years in December. That is an achievement I can never match. So anyway, I'm just really grateful to have you all here and to have my parents join us and get to see this story. You know, we're talking about safety and how committed I've been to making sure that those around me are safe, no matter what I was going through. And coming up against a situation where the walls and the ceiling couldn't even be counted on any longer is about as unsafe as you can get when you're holed up waiting for a hurricane to come forward. And so that's my experience of really going in deeply to understand why was I there, which I imagine is a question some of you have, and what can I learn from this Category 5 experience of epic proportions. So, you know, we've all had Category 5 experiences. Some of you may not relate to the largest weather event in the Atlantic Basin like Hurricane Irma was, but you've had experiences that may feel like epic proportion in the life or in business. And so I have put together in the course of my digesting this experience and integrating it and finding value for myself, the idea of what strategies worked to help me through this experience, to help me survive and thrive without electricity, telecoms, running water, cooking gas. All of that was a very challenging, the most challenging experience of my life. And I've been at sea in hurricane force winds, but being on a boat actually feels safer than how it felt on my island home in Hurricane Irma. So one of the things that, I've written a book, which you can see on my banner here, and I brought a couple of copies of it just in case you wanted to see it, but I was all the way back from on the mainland, getting off the island after a couple months of surviving, and finally got off the island. And a friend of mine was looking at my book on Amazon and looked at the back of it, and it says, Weathering the Storm, which has been in my social media and a guiding principle for me for my entire professional life. So it's kind of funny to me that there it was on my book and my materials and as a principle that guided me throughout my life. So what is a Category 5? I want to give you some perspective. This is Irma heading towards us with a direct hit. My island home is right about where those two lines meet in above Road Town on Tortola. Who's been to the BVI? Anybody spend time in Tortola? Nanny Key Marina, probably. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of familiar sights to some of you, and others I'll explain some of it, but this is where we were when Hurricane Irma was making her way up from Africa, slowing down and gaining power. And Category 5s, they have more power emitted in 10 minutes than all the world's nuclear weapons combined. Irma was the size of Ohio, and it was the largest weather event to ever happen in the Atlantic Basin. The first largest event was a cyclone down in Australia, not that long ago, actually, but it was, for us, the biggest weather event to happen on our side of the hemisphere. And the Saffir-Simpson scale only goes up to 5, and in terms of miles per hour, it tops out at 157. We saw consistent weather readings of 185 up to 200. There's talk that we were in the 225s and beyond. There's some readings of gusts up to 285. And the scale only increases by 20 miles per hour. So that's why Richard Branson called it a Category 7, because we were off the charts. And I chuckled recently when I saw an article about how they're going to come up with a Category 6, and how novel and interesting that was. And I thought, we've already passed that. And to give you an idea, too, that 20 miles per hour is exponentially different. So it's the square of the difference. So a Category 4 is 250 times more powerful than a Category 3, and a Category 5 is 500 times more powerful than a Category 4. And we were sending around a video in the days before, just before Irma, when it was looking like a Category 5 was coming our way. And they had this video of what happens in a house on a Category 1, 2, 3, up to 5. And 5 blows the roof off the house. And that's all, a little bit funny. We're a little bit, anxious. We're doing our part. We're in Hurricane Alley, so we have our measures to take. And it's theoretical at that point. You can't imagine it till it happens, what that's really like. And so it's on our way, and we have this expectation. To give you an idea of perspective, Puerto Rico was hit by a Category 4. Now, they have 4 million people on that island, so God bless them, they're still suffering, and they were there for us when we needed them, so it breaks my heart. But imagine if they had gotten Irma a direct hit like we had for our 30,000 people on Tortola. So I want to take you into this experience with me just for a few seconds, really. Now, I'm going to play an audio for you of what it was like to be holed up in my shelter for hours and hours. The pressure that I was experiencing, the sounds, and ultimately, one of the doors of my sliding glass opening was lifted off the frame and opened, so the storm was literally coming into my shelter. And then I got trapped by the pressure on the other door, so I was trapped in what I call my wind coffin. So what I'm going to ask you to do with me is close your nose, hold your breath, and blow out through your ears. And just listen in for a minute and see what that feels like. Do we have volume? Anyone? I hope so, but sorry, guys. I'm going to ask if we can get some audio because I have some videos and stuff to show. Now? Okay. It's not working. Hopefully you're breathing again. Sorry.
Push the button again. Try it again.
Oops. Oh, sorry. It's not my clicker, so it's all new to me. Okay, we all remember that slide.
Hit that one again.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's try again, everybody. Oh,
So the settings, you got,
Bob should have it happen.
it's not Bob. You've got to, where's your,
you guys ready to try again? Okay. Got to hold your nose and blow out through your ears. No breaths. It's not the same. All right. I'm sorry, everybody. We're done with this exercise, but I do want to play the videos with sound. Is that possible? That didn't work. It's the same audio, same file. We need someone under the age of 16.
Bob, what's wrong?
We'll make Bob do.
Make Bob do it.
It's always something.
Where is it? There it is. Where is her
It was making sound on
finder?
the computer.
Yeah, I need a finder here.
Best laid plans.
The BMD, USMR. Let's try that. And what was that? What were you running on?
Probably the PowerPoint.
Try it again.
Okay, I'm just going to play it to see if it works. Not to put you through that again. Oops. Ah, shit. Let's move on, right? This is the place I fell in love with. This was the view from my house on a beautiful, normal day in the BVI. And I got my captain's license. I was delivering boats off the eastern seaboard and stepped foot on the shores of the west end of Tortola and just fell in love with it. So I stayed. I built my home there. I was down there for a couple of years, more full-time and then part-time, which is where I ended up being there in September of 2017. And as I said, Irma was on her way, and we had what I figured was the gold standard of preparation. And one of the things I learned about myself is it's really important to take stock, right? When danger is heading its way, we really didn't know what that was going to mean, but understanding myself and any leadership that I was going to be called upon, being ready for that and being willing to take the experience outside of myself so I didn't let it identify me, are some of the ways that I was able to keep moving when all hell broke loose. And so Mark Twain says, success is ignorance and confidence. I had plenty of both. I did plenty of things right. I worked with my friends who are also boat captains, offshore experienced people, people who run the salvage company to clean up after the messes in the Caribbean. And we cross-checked each other. I had water, I had cash, I had gasoline in my car, I had food supplies. The kinds of things you have to expect are going to happen when we switch to a task-based economy and there are no services. One takes for granted the idea that you could go buy something if you needed it. That wasn't possible for weeks. So there I was in the gold standard of hurricane preparation. These corrugated metal, oh geez. Okay, that one's me. All right, we're back. I won't hit that button again. So this is the front of my house. And that metal, those metal boards, galvanized metal, are screwed in with cement screws, concrete screws built for that. And the roof was very well constructed. My landlord is a minister of public works and, has access to resources. It was a very safe place. So safe, I felt, that I spent the day before Irma helping my friends. So this was the home of the person who runs the salvage company, and he was completely exposed at the corner of, those of you who know Nanny Key Marina, the new condos that look straight out over to the Caribbean Sea. Beautiful view and location, but completely exposed. And never mind the storm surge worries. They had exposed windows floor to ceiling. So we spent the time, this is a couple that were living aboard their boat and did their best to secure their boat. And by luck of the draw, thank God, their boat lived. Well, not undamaged, but they could get back to inhabiting it. And so we were all together helping each other out, boarding up the home that was going to take care of our friends while they were running around securing the marina as best anyone could. And there's nothing more to do. So, as I said, we have to prepare like we're going offshore. And, understanding what our goals are, knowing what our resources are going to be, and working together are some of the things that I did well and correctly. And coming from a yacht racing world and a sailing, when we're working together as a crew, we were pretty efficient. There are some things I did very poorly, and some of that was taking some things for granted. And there were a couple of key pieces of equipment that I didn't know I was going to long for, which include my VHF radio and my satellite tracker that would allow me to communicate by text and email to anywhere in the world via satellite. Both of these devices would have made a big difference to me after Irma, and they were safely secure on my boat, which makes sense when you're offshore, but I was on an island about to be attacked. So those are the kinds of things I learned in this process. And here we are on the day of, and you can see the storm starting to come in. And, again, I'm feeling pretty darn secure. The only exposure are windows on one side of the property, hurricane windows, but I'm feeling really safe inside my cocoon and thinking, just having a normal day, looking at Facebook. A friend of mine is Facebooking live from his hilltop shelter, floor-to-ceiling glass. They had taped one strip of masking tape and a cross on one door. And they were videoing from the top of that hill, and I thought, are you crazy? Go secure your windows. And the tragedy there were 6 people and triplets, 6-month-old triplets, sheltered in that house. The couple that was filming, they lost their house, and that house was destroyed around them. They escaped with one woman each taking a baby and crawling out through a bathroom door. So there were people who had it worse than me, And there are people who had it better, who fared better than me. So we're all equalized in this situation. And so here we are in the onset of the first wall. Again, no audio, so I can't really help you understand what it sounds like, but you can see for a minute what it looks like. And I'm guessing, Bob, there's nothing I can. All right, so anyway, that was the first wall. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about when I say wall, the hurricane is like a cylinder, right? Big, round, circular thing, and it comes in two parts. The first wall hitting and makes a 180-degree turn during the eye, and the second wall comes. So we got hit on the east side of the island in the first wall, and then the eye, and then the west side of the island was destroyed. And for me, it was the east side of my house and those hurricane windows, and then the front of my house, basically. And so those are those windows that I was talking about. They're exposed, and a friend of mine asked me, were you afraid for your life? And I said, I was praying to those windows to hold. Because I honestly felt like if those windows had gone, my life was truly in danger in a way that I had never really appreciated before. And I had taken my valuables, my passport, credit money, phones, and put them in a little suitcase in a closet, hoping that if the windows did blow and I lost everything in my sheltered space, that I would at least have my suitcase full of, valuables that would be protected behind a closet door. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway, we do what we can. And so here we go again is the wall coming on. This is about 11:30 in the morning, and this is about the end of the first wall. Again, I apologize for the lack of audio, but it's okay. You guys get it, right? It's wind. We'll have one more, and I'll take you through that one, and I will stop talking, and then Bob can, if he can do it from there. Okay, fantastic. So I'll take you through that later. But anyway, this is the eye of the storm directly over, and it's exactly what you could imagine, right? It's Armageddon on one side, and then the moment comes where it's light out. And I mean, not pitch, sunny bright, but see the blue sky there? And at this point, the roof has blown off the house, and these are pieces of the galvanized metal roof that were all over the front area of the building. And, we could get out. I could check on my car. I, for some reason, picked up my local telephone and thought to call my brother because I was alone in this. Again, ignorance and confidence. That was a crazy thing to do, to be alone in a hurricane. And I didn't know, it's for a couple months, that I was the only person I'd ever talked to in Irma that was alone for that. So needless to say, when I had a moment and I could tell someone that I was alive, it meant something to me. And this is the front gate where these pieces were wrapped and wedged so firmly that I thought they'd never move. I had to climb over them just to get off the porch. And you'll see why that's relevant later. And I think this is my... so here's a better perspective. Anybody remember Andrew? And you can see what I'm talking about here in size comparison. Size really does matter when it comes to hurricanes. And here is the second wall. I'm going to stop talking for a minute. That's the closest I could get to being outside. Remember, I was trapped here with an opening, with a storm blowing inside and unable to get out. And I had another maybe 10 to 12 hours to go before daybreak. And it's terrifying. The most terrifying thing ever to know that I couldn't call anybody. I was not visible. I was behind boarded up walls. I had no idea how I was going to get out of there. And so I had to, forcibly calm myself down from the panic of being trapped there. And this is what it looked like. Remember those pieces of roofing? They're all strung out across the hillside, and it's really post-apocalyptic. And this is just my front yard, all those trees you saw. This is my house, the top floor of my house, what kind of damage it can do for a Category 5 with furniture and everything flung around the property. This is the view where you can see down in the end there, that's a Royal BVI Yacht Club. At the end of the point to the left is the Virgin Islands Search and Rescue hangar, which I was a volunteer for as a search and rescue person, and it was destroyed. And of course, boats upended on land. It's the kind of thing that became commonplace as we moved through. And here's another view from my hillside. You don't need to hear audio for this, but that's what it looked like the day after Irma. And you can see the once lush green island has been stripped of trees, stripped of rooftops, and it's just desolate and terrifying, and we're alone and isolated. And so this is my car. I survived. I got a couple of windows blown out. Electrical was kind of messed with, but we had Hurricane Jose coming 3 days later. They were announcing that by car with a bullhorn, letting people know to clean up their hillsides because another hurricane was coming. And that was how we were communicated with. And I was at the top of a hill, not half a mile straight down, so I could hear the messaging. But we had no weather reports, no way to stay current as a community. And so all I could do was protect the one thing that I thought might become a superpower, which was transportation. So I gathered all the duct tape, plastic garbage bags, shipping tape, you name it, and secured my car, which became very handy over the next month and a half or so. And this is the Paraquita Bay, where it's a hurricane hole. It's where they put all the charter boats and the people who go off island. That place was a mess, and this is what it was supposed to look like, where they go to protect the boats. So it was, there's just no place that was safe in these conditions. And here's one of those interesting survivors: tarantulas, chickens, wasps, birds. I mean, we didn't have a roof in sight from my hillside, and the wildlife survived. Go figure. And this house was important to me because one of my neighbors, we were all gathered around the bottom floor of my shelter. It was a duplex, so the second, there were other people. Everyone was camped out. And one guy just happened to mention, oh, my St. Lucia phone is working. And I thought, what the heck? I have a U.S. phone with me. I'm going to climb the top of that hill. I was just one property below and went out on the landing and found a signal waving my phone around. First call I made was to Verizon to make sure this was for real and was going to last. And you're not charging me for this, right? It's really expensive. And the second, of course, was to let my family know that I was alive. And this was the day after Irma, and that phone became, again, another superpower for me, having communication. And that's the most critical thing that I was able to do to be of service first, which was keep people informed. I could communicate to the 30,000 people in the BVI Abroad Hurricane Irma Facebook group, but I couldn't talk to my friends a couple miles down the road at Nanny Key for 10 days, thanks to not having my VHF, but also I was trapped up on my hill for a number of days. We had a road that was washed out. We didn't know if it was going to be serviceable, and we were all stuck. So being able to communicate, sharing my story, being able to talk about what I was experiencing with somebody out there made such a difference. And then I became a media contact for getting our story out. I volunteered with the BVI Abroad, BVI Volunteers Organization, and was a liaison for medical personnel coming in from offshore. And I provided geolocation information to the UK Defence Ministry whenever I could get a signal, which was unreliable, but nonetheless, it was better than most. And probably for a couple of weeks, I was the only person, or one of the very few, certainly the only one in my neighborhood, that had access to telecoms intermittently. So we started seeing the the British military coming in. They sent ships very shortly after. They were doing sorties and evac. And we understood that we had to adapt to the situation and take each difficulty and turn it into an opportunity. So without running water and not having transportation, which was most people's lot, I had to contribute in the best way that I could. So I would do grocery runs and I'd be out searching for water from sources. And we built a new community of people that I'd never really spent time with, because I was, from my house to the marina and hanging around the boating community. And these were, hillside people. And, we find humor where we could. And that was being able to develop and understand my own tolerance for this kind of thing as part of the learning in this experience. So I get off my hillside, and this is right below the grocery store that was looted the day after. This is the kind of thing that's very common: boat on land, ferried boat sitting on land, the ferry dock is destroyed, the old prison. This is going through town. Anybody remember Pussers? Most people have had their first rum drink at Pussers in Roadtown on their way into the islands. And, cars upended, things that we counted on and we're spending our, Friday nights or whatever, were just gone. And that was the most challenging thing, to just look around and not see anything recognizable. This was Main Street that was impenetrable for 2 weeks before they could get equipment in, before even the business owners could get in there. And then these buildings lived, and these are just little shacks in town that were selling tourist items. So it was a surprise. And boat meets car is a common scene throughout. This is just Road Town. What it looked like was a war zone. And I can imagine only what refugees experience, and I've seen it in my own community, just how challenging it was and the kinds of things that they experienced. And finally, days later, we got a grocery store open. One grocery store to service 30,000 people. And because of the looting, remember that the buildings were destroyed, and the prison was no different than just another building. So our prison was destroyed, and that meant 150 hardened criminals. Who would have thought? What's to fight about in the Caribbean? But they're wandering the streets. They've escaped. They've gotten out, and there's looting, and there's rumors of machete-wielding marauders, and that kind of danger is the sort of thing that people were afraid of, and so they were limiting us to 20 people at a time going into the grocery store. So we had to stand out there for 3 hours in the blistering heat, and some people are smart enough to bring an umbrella. I was not. But we got some music, and that's the spirit of the Caribbean, right? Is people bringing music to the most dire of situations. And so being able to see the possibilities, knowing that I could get in my car and provide resources for my community. They were taking care of me, and I was taking care of them, delivering supplies, doing what's uncomfortable. I couldn't tell you today how I got through each day, how I spent the days, but they were full. And maybe it was just digesting and recovering, but I always found an activity. And going to the grocery store, as you could see, would take hours. Going to find water would take hours. So the one gas station, when I had to replenish my gas, that kind of thing, just everything was one task I'm going to do today. And I just had to go venture out. And so this is the typical kind of road hazard, wandering around the island as I was documenting the situation for my own memories and to share with my community and to feel less alone, because I still haven't seen my friends yet. And so boat on the road, power lines, trees down, that's the kind of thing that, as the weeks wore on, started tearing up people's cars. And by grace of God, I was all over that island and didn't have one mechanical issue that would strand me. And I really didn't think about it enough. Again, ignorance, right? Is that if something had happened to me on a hillside or somewhere away from my home, I couldn't call anybody. Because mostly I didn't have telecoms, and nobody was going to come rescue me. And most of the people out there were in as bad a shape as I was. So it was a high-risk behavior, and one that I'm kind of known for, I guess, as a yacht racer and a boat captain. But this is the West End, scraped hillsides, the customs. There's still doing customs out of a tent. This building has not been rebuilt. Fish and Lime, anybody remember Fish and Lime or the Willie T? Right, so the Fish and Lime is a restaurant that was destroyed here on the West End and never rebuilt. The owners are walking away, but they're the same owners of the Willie T, and that's back in business, which I'll share. More of the West End damage. Pusser's West End did not do as well, in case you were hoping for a rum drink there. And the West End was just littered. They got hit as hard as the East End, but this is more of the boating community. And here is to our rescue, the Royal Marines. God love them. They were given as little as 1 hour up to 6 hours notice that they were going to be leaving their homes and heading to the BVI from the UK. They came without radios, raincoats, satellite terminals, and guns. But God bless them, they still restored order and helped recapture all the criminals and did a lot of public works support for us. And this is them landing at Nanny Key. Some of you might recognize that beach. And one of the greatest services to our community was not just securing Nanny Key, but also bringing these pipes out. You can see in the right corner there, water supply to the community. Nanny Key was making RO water, reverse osmosis water, more quickly. They had more generator power than anywhere else on the island, so they were recovering faster. And first thing they did was deliver water to the community at large. And if you could get there, you could get water. And it was, it felt like a lifeline to me. I'd been bathing in a Petri dish of water, where if I accidentally spilled it, and there goes my toothbrush money or water, or washing my face, and I would have a panic. One of the things that I thank God remembered to do, because a friend of mine reminded me before Irma, was to fill up my bathtub. And I was lying in bed at 11 o'clock the night before, and I thought, I forgot to fill up my bathtub. All right, I'm going to get up. And that bathtub was much like this water. It's made me feel like I had a lifeline, something to flush toilets with. Who thinks about that stuff? And once I was able to start replenishing, I could start to feel a little bit of security. And another one of those explicable, this is outside of Nanny Key, Captain Mulligan's, if you know that place. These playgrounds survived, and, it's a good place to take kids, apparently. It survives Category 5 hurricanes. Catsy is a 56-ton catamaran that was lifted out of the water, spun around in a tornado, and turned upside down at the entrance of Nanny Key and stayed there for over 6 months. They literally we had a barely one lane to get through, so they could only alternate cars in and out of the marina, and they had to build a road out of the ditch next to it for those months so that they could have ingress and egress. There's 300 boats at Nanny Key that are destroyed, and they need to clean up. This is the boatyard, and the boats on the Hard. This is even farther down the road after Irma. The hotel. And they had put people in here, liveaboards, and people who had, other kinds of shelter, not on the top floor, thank God, but they survived through staying in the hotel. Those people that you saw helping my friends ended up in a shower stall with their family of 4, among 40 other people, to save themselves in Irma. Remember, we also had storm surge coming, and the marina was widely exposed. And I love the politeness of the Brits with their sign during the worst of it, pre-Maria, right? Well, this is only still the first 2 weeks before. We had a week to relax when Jose took a right turn and start to clean up. And then we had a week of worry about Maria, the second Category 5 hurricane, due 2 weeks to the day after Irma. So this is what was left of the marina. Some of you have been to Nanny Key, right? All of the everything you know as a marina was gone. the storm surge was so strong that the boats were buried, some of them for up to a month, could not be recovered. They couldn't be found because of the storm surge and the visibility. And the water is very dangerous. And these are, in the corner there is one of my salvage crew friends. And they were getting staph infections. Everywhere they were close to shore was risk for the debris that ended up in the waters there. Very dangerous. And we had the Puerto Rican Navy helping us out. They were a clearing zone for supplies that were coming in, and they were there 3 days before Maria, ongoing, but up to 3 days before. And it was crushing to me, both that we needed and appreciated their support, but that they weren't home securing their own homes. And all I could think of was, please go home and protect yourselves, because we know what this is like. And we all know how that turned out. Maria turned away from us for a direct hit, which saved probably actual lives, and then hit Puerto Rico and did its own damage there. This is a post-Maria survival story for the sign. It was going to come back. We will rebuild. And understanding all along that you have to draw on all your skills in a Category 5 situation, I had to up my game and really stay on top of things just to be of use, to have service, and to survive, and ultimately to thrive. It was amazing that, again, I couldn't tell you how I did it. I know that everything I'd done in my life before helped prepare me for this experience. And these guys came in from the HMS Ocean from the UK. That ship had the capacity to power 8,000 homes and produce 30,000 gallons of water. And they were just making a stop, so they were only there for a few days, not powering us up. But these guys came in on leave and helped us clean up at Nanny Key. It was really generous of them. They didn't have to. It was their time off. And here's a little humor that we used to indulge ourselves, a car that actually survived. All the windows are intact, and that was at Nanny Key. So that's an extraordinary thing. Sugar Mill, the finest hotel on the island. Mayette's Cane Garden Bay, a very popular location. This is the kind of stuff that was littering the beach and what it looked like in post-apocalyptic Cane Garden, which is a paradise for many cruisers and cruise ship people. And this is Apple Bay. Anybody been to Bomba Shack before for the mushroom parties? The road is gone, and it's a sand ditch. And I had to drive my car into basically a 5 to 8 foot ditch to get through this particular patch where the Bomba Shack was destroyed. And there's chunks of road along the side. And all the beach access was destroyed in terms of road access. And Rudy's Bar at the top of the hill that used to look over everything. The trellis. This was just the story of everywhere. The full moon parties at Trellis Bay and the beach littered. This took months to get these boats off the beach. And they're just destroyed and left behind, abandoned. So being able to use good judgment and make decisions along the way is really important. And experiences are what create good judgment. But Rita Mae Brown says, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So I'm not going to ever forget a VHF radio if I'm heading back to Hurricane Alley or my tracker. But, we were all afraid all the time. It took a month before the knots would unwind enough to just start to feel normal again. But complacency will kill you. And as long as we kept moving and doing what was in front of us each step of the way, we were okay. And this was my first day back into the water at Long Bay. It was a big sandy road, and I had a 4-wheel drive to get there, but it felt human again to be able to put my feet in the sand and feel the warm waters of this Caribbean Sea. And we got offshore to Norman Island, where the Willie T was at the Pirates Bite. And this is what was left of the Willie T, for those of you who remember that boat. And the top half of it was in the bight, underwater. We snorkeled and found it. But the good news is the Willie T 3.0 is back, and she's been moved to Peter Island. So that's a happy ending for the Willie T. And Cane Garden Bay, 2 months later, still damaged. As of even as recently as this past weekend, they're still doing cleanup in the bays, trying to restore the coral and the nature and make the water safe again. But it's beautiful still. And this is very recent too. In the last week at Cane Garden Bay, paradise is still at our fingertips. The beaches, the waters were not destroyed, and the green came back very quickly to make us all feel like our paradise is slowly returning despite our personal circumstances. And here's a visit from the prince, future king, and very common experience for people in their homes. This kind of a structure and damage was very common still. And the electricity did not get restored on the island for over 6 months. But these guys were our heroes, the pole dancers, if you will, from the BVI Electric Company. And those stores lived to tell the tale and open their doors again to sell things. My one regret is that I didn't buy something from these people. And the baths. Anybody been to Virgin Gorda, right? We know Bitter End Yacht Club. The baths, they could pick up the Catsy, but the boulders stayed intact, and the baths are as beautiful as ever. And Nanny Key Marina got 60 new docks that came in from the UK that arrived around November, December, and been installed and functional. And Nanny Key was able to pull off the 2018 Spring Regatta, which was an extraordinary accomplishment for the marina. And the attendants were so helpful, and people volunteered to help restore the island when they could. And they even used for the trophies hurricane debris and made some beautiful trophies out of the remnants of our storm experience. And this might look familiar, what once was the Bitter End. This is Irma. This is the Irma impacted Bitter End Yacht Club. Very sad, but the cleanup has taken place. They vow to rebuild, and you'll see the barge here where they were bringing in equipment. And Sebastian's was the site of my very first landing in the BVI. This is the story, more common now, of what's opening. We keep track of that. And the ferry docks with gleaming new boats and a new facility, it's all coming back. And this is taking months. This was 8 months in. And the BVI is strong. This is Sandy Spit, where we were able to discover that key was still there. And this is something none of us will ever forget. September to Remember. This was actually a poster from the ferry companies, but prior to Irma. And my last sunrise there on the island, I didn't know when I got to the ferry dock, what was the new ferry dock, I mean the cruise ship dock that they used to get people off island, whether I'd actually get on a plane. And I'm here to tell you that I did. It was touch and go, but thank God. And you know, I understood that these are the kinds of things, these strategies, and all of my life in preparation for being able to survive this and other Category 5 situations that we all encounter. And really, all we can ever do is what's in front of us and just use what we have and do what we can. And so that's been my experience here. It's what helped me survive and thrive and be able to come back here and share this story with others and hope that it's of value. And I appreciate you all staying with me so much. Thank you.
Welcome again to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our speaker today, Christine Prokos, is a lawyer, a business coach, a successful entrepreneur, a 100-ton license holder, and now a hurricane survivor. Congratulations, Christine. We're all happy? Two-time. Let's make sure we have sound here. Perfect, Bob. Okay.
That's right, two-time Category 5 hurricane survivor.
Two-time. So give us a scale. What was the economic cost of the two back-to-back hurricanes on Tortola? Are there numbers published?
Well, there are reports that were issued regularly. The first report a month after Irma, with as much information as one could gather, as the government could gather, was $3 billion. And that's an island of 30,000 people. So imagine in terms of scale how Puerto Rico fared, and those numbers I'm sure have climbed since that month.
Now, I'm going to ask questions, and if you have one, hold your hand up. John's holding the mic. He'll bring the mic to you, and we'll listen to as many questions as we have from the audience. How many days between the two hurricanes?
Exactly 2 weeks.
2 weeks. And so how much advance notice did the citizens of Tortola have of the first hurricane? Can you talk about the sort of discussion, worry, and spirit of the island as the hurricanes were approaching?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had as much notice as everybody, right? Because at that point we had internet, we had weather readings, we had everything accessible to us. Everything was functional. We lost all the wind instruments and things that in the storm. So before Irma, we were there watching the onset approach of the storm. And I was with friends that I holed up with the night before, the ones I'd been helping along. And we waited for the 11 o'clock p.m. weather report as our last bit of information before we all went our separate ways. And this friend of mine who is runs the salvage company, been on the island for 35 years, he turned to me and said, "I'm scared." And that was the moment that I knew, boy, I need to take this very seriously. Those of us who were protected felt safe. Those of us who weren't didn't know any better. And we all learned a lot from that event.
Question in the back of the room, yes.
Christine, thank you so much for your talk, and congratulations making it through that crazy situation. My question is this, with the projections for major storms like this getting much worse as a result of global warming in the future, there's now some reports that insurance companies are trying to get out from insuring places that are in the direct path of some of these storms. Are people getting reinsured at this point? Are you seeing any problems with insurance companies?
Well, I've seen problems from just getting coverage for the previous storms. My own property, which belongs to my landlord, it was 7 months before they were still arguing with the insurance company for recovery. Lots of people have that story to tell. The insurance companies, you can imagine here, just like there, the losses are so huge, and these companies may not be able to weather those losses as insurance companies. And so there's that. So that's a constant struggle. I can't speak to reinsurance, but I believe that people are getting reinsured, or they're staying insured. They're not being canceled for the storms. It's written in all the policies that were in Hurricane Alley. So the reality is what it is. It's not an aberration that we got a hurricane. It's the magnitude that was out of the ordinary. And if you recall, what you know about is the ocean temperature was so warm that the conditions were very ripe for an epic proportion storm. And the scientific community believes that that's only going to continue or increase, so we could anticipate more. But year after year, we've heard, this is going to be a big one, and we weathered the onset of Hurricane Beryl that turned and avoided the BBI, and I could feel my stomach tightening. And I actually spoke to somebody at one of my talks who'd been to the BBI in the last 2 months and said the temperatures were actually not as warm as they were last year. So everybody's making a guess and trying to bank and prepare for what we can prepare for. We have to change our building codes, though, for sure.
Now, how long have you lived in Tortola?
I was down there since 2014.
And how many hurricanes have hit Tortola since then? Were these the only
since?
two? Yeah, or have there been others?
No, these are the only two. Those are the only 2 in 4 years.
Okay, and are these the only hurricanes you've experienced?
Yes.
And the difference between when the big hurricane came across, you said it was the size of Ohio. How long was it overhead?
In the eye?
Yeah.
About 45 minutes to an hour, under an hour.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And
It's
so,
about 80 miles.
did you have pets?
Circumference.
Talk about pets. How did pets? You mentioned a bit about pets. How do they survive? What happened with pets? Give us a pet story.
Well, the tarantula wasn't my pet, but
He seemed pretty well. He seemed like he
was
liked things.
very comfortable. Yeah. And it is amazing. I didn't have any pets myself because I'm in and out too much. But friends that did were able to save the pets that I know. All survived. The worry for some was where are you going to get food? The grocery store wasn't open for a week. And if you didn't have, and those people on the East End and other parts of the island, if you know it, it's very hilly. And there were properties that were impassable for over a week. So just getting someplace from certain parts of the island, again, I was lucky because I had a road that would get me there in a working car. But those two people that I talked about that were live streaming in Facebook, they had a 6-month-old cat, and their home was destroyed, their shelter was destroyed, and the cat disappeared. And they fled the island because it was so traumatic what they experienced. And we were all looking out in the BBI community for that cat. And 2 months later, she reappeared.
Question from the back of the room.
So, as you said, hurricanes are natural, they're regular. They hit the United States mainland with frequency. We have a lot of history on that. We know, as you mentioned, Andrew came and wiped out Homestead in '92. We have experience with Katrina, Cat 3, coming in and doing major damage in New Orleans. What do you think, now that you've gone through this experience, what do you think people will go through when, say, a 3, 4, or God forbid a 5 makes a direct hit on Miami and all of its skyscrapers that have been built in the last 20, 30 years?
Well, one of the things that was interesting about Puerto Rico, which was, again, a Cat 4, I saw the tall buildings standing and windows intact. I don't know, if there was buildings were blocking buildings, and that helped. It was the villages, the small communities and outlying communities that were most damaged, and the wreckage was severe. And I think we have to change our building codes in these hurricane zones. I think most of us can't imagine the kind of damage that I shared with you today. And so, even we're only talking right after Irma. What do we have to do to build roofs that will stay intact? There were some properties that weathered that with a roof intact. The new condos at Nanny Key and some properties in oddly sparse areas in the West End. And so, we have to change that, but we also have to prepare well. And there were countless stories. In the last 4 years, it wasn't the only hurricane warning we've been given or the only hurricane watch we were on in last year. It was the only one that actually hit us directly. So we get complacent, right? We all think we're going to end up in the bar. We put up our shelters and we prepared ourselves, and then we're going to end up in the bar drinking beers and laughing about how, she took a right turn, And so we can't get complacent. That's what kills.
Describe your hurricane shelter. You mentioned being in a hurricane shelter. You thought of it as a hurricane tomb for a bit. What was it? How did you make it? When did you make it?
Well, it was the downstairs of my building. It was the part that was enclosed except for the hurricane windows, which did hold, thank God. And by first light, I didn't sleep or anything. I just waited it out and calmed myself by taking a lot of notes. I wrote things down. What did I learn? What do I want to do better? I kept myself occupied through the night. And at first light, luckily, one of the small windows had some of that metal boarding was torn off the concrete wall, and I had a little opening so I could open the window and wait until I saw somebody outside who was, dazed and confused walking around, and yelled to them, and ultimately got 3 guys to come over and help me get the door open on one side so I could get out.
So was it below road level? Or was it
we're
just
up,
first floor?
Just the first floor of the building, yeah.
Okay. And was it safe because it was thick walls? Describe why it was a safe place to be.
Because the building entirely wasn't destroyed. It was concrete walls, mostly held except for in the top floor. And I think because the damage was done on top, we created a wind tunnel so it could move through in the second wall from that building.
Yes.
Christine, Thanks so much for your talk, and I'd like to know when you decided that you'd write about this. Was it during the hurricane or later? And also, who took the photos? Because they're, wonderful, quote unquote, air quotes.
Thank you. I guess, right? It's a dubious distinction, but it was important to me to be as present as I could be. I had no experience with this kind of experience, this event, and I know that I'd made mistakes, and I know I wanted to learn. I'm a voracious learner in anything that I am interested in, and as a boat captain and a sailor, we could all be caught in weather, so it was about getting the most I could from the experience. And at that point when I got off my hillside and just knowing that I could be connected to people through our Facebook group, the 35,000 strong BVI Abroad community, made me feel connected. So posting and sharing and documenting to me made that something that gave me purpose. And I became a media liaison. So I was being interviewed when they could reach me by all major media outlets, and including Sailing Illustrated, and the New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, Canadian television. So it kind of became an impromptu mission for me. I had a camera phone, and I was inside my car some of the time, which you could see if you looked closely.
The question was, what kind of camera? And you said you had a camera phone.
A camera phone. It was the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. In fact, because of my relationship and experience with Verizon, and me dealing with this, I was offshore in this situation for 2 months, praying that A, I would have a working phone as long as possible, and B, that I wouldn't get charged for it because it would be a fortune, because I was the only phone working in my community. And when I got back, I shared my story with some people who put me in touch with Verizon's high-level corporate people, and they gave me a replacement Note 8 as a thank you gift, I guess, and paid off my Edge 7. It was a lovely ending to that part of the story.
How did the population of Tortola change coming up to the hurricane? And I want to get that first question, and then...
Well, it's summer, right? Most people who are smart, they flee, right? It's hurricane season, for heaven's sakes. So a lot of people are off island doing their annual...
Half of the people, a third?
Maybe a third. I was, to be fair, one of the few white people on the island at that point. People who have means tend to go abroad when they can. It's perfect
What's
time.
the argument for staying with your house versus leaving?
Well, everybody asks me, why did you stay? And I honestly feel that in this situation, I am glad I was there, not because of the harrowing experience I survived, but because I could protect my property to the best of my ability. I could help restore my own property and help the community. And so I would have felt a desperation to get back if I wasn't there, and I would have felt like I was leaving a mess for others to clean up. So that was important to me.
Question from Bruce Monroe.
Steen, thanks so very much. I'm a retired lawyer, and I noticed that Ron says you got a law degree from USC. How useful did you find your law degree during the hurricane?
Good question, actually. And honestly, one of my other activities post-Irma was to help my friends with a salvage company. You cannot imagine what it's like to get a 90-ton crane onto an island in the Caribbean. So I took over the responsibility of helping my friend, the owner of this company, getting heavy machinery in to help with the cleanup. And so I guess I would say that dealing with, shipping brokers in multiple territories and major acquisitions to the tune of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, it certainly came into play.
Well, that question was actually my lame attempt at a little humor, since you said humor was important in the aftermath of all this. But really, after you got your law degree, did you use it before you did all your other activities, or is that just something you did out of interest?
No, absolutely I did. I worked in a major New York law firm for a couple of years, but also as a serial entrepreneur and a business advisor for 25 years. That legal training and education and my experiences as a lawyer have served me in every area of my life. Thank you for asking. So
what was the sea state like in the harbor outside the island? What was the water like there, and how big was the storm surge?
Before, during, or after?
Yeah, during this hurricane itself.
Well, I wasn't on sea level, right?
But you could see out there, or could you not even see that far out?
I could see, well, when I could be outside, right? And that was during the first wall and in the eye. We had about 14 foot. They expected up to 20, so I would guess Paraquita got more than we did at Nanny Key, but it was enough surge to bury almost every boat that was still moored in the marina and bury all the docks, all the pylons. There was nothing at Nanny Key except for 2 docks, B and F, I think. And it was luck of the draw. If your boat was tied up to that particular dock, you were saved. And if not, it was under. And I had friends who lived aboard their boat and ran a charter company. They lost everything, and their boat was not recovered for a month underwater in the marina.
Was it obvious that boats should be in the marina or anchor outs? That would not work at all.
Well, I anchored outside the breakwater. I would
Yeah.
say no, but
Right.
interestingly, because of the wind directions, that's the theory. The old marina was destroyed, but the new marina had already. There were a couple of docks that were in the new marina, and the boats that were there, including the family that I had helped prepare with the day before. Those boats were spared. Those docks were spared. So it was really a matter of angle and wind direction and storm surge that protected certain little pockets. So the new marina fared much better than the old. Well, it fared as opposed to the old, which did not.
Another question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Medical facilities, did they remain intact? And there must have been multiple injuries during
deaths.
this hurricane, and
Yeah.
I was curious about first responders and medical care.
Well, there's never enough, right? And all the clinics were destroyed, but the hospital was still standing. The emergent cases were evacuated as quickly as the military sorties could get them off the island. And we had some private plane owners from Puerto Rico that came in and helped evacuate emergent people and situations. And it was... So there wasn't ever enough. There were people stranded. There were deaths. The staph infection was rapid and increasing. And but the hospital, to their credit, and the medical care providers were doing a heroic job of taking care of people as they could. And the hospital was open, and you could go there for very quickly after, if you could get there. Because remember, most of the population lives up the hills and into the hills, and many were stranded. So getting there was the big challenge.
You said there was a 14-foot sea surge. What about waves right outside the island? Were they 5 foot, 10 foot?
That was hard for me to be able to discern in terms
Fatalities. How many fatalities?
We know of 25 in the BVI.
And how many of the fatalities happened because of the hurricane itself directly, or because of lack of care afterwards?
Well, I would say those 25 are the direct consequences. As we know with Puerto Rico, there's other deaths that have occurred, probably related and hurricane-affected casualties, but aren't counted because they weren't directly tied to the event itself. There were, just to say, in Maria, 2 weeks later, people without roofs, without resources, without community, were living in roofless buildings, or what was left of buildings, with chairs, with 2x4s strung between 2 chairs to keep off the flooring so they don't get flooded. And, that's how some people got through.
How long were you without electricity?
It was never restored while I was still there. 6 months before the whole island. I think about 3 months onto my property.
And how about water for your property?
That was in a month and a half.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience. Yes.
Yes, there's, I'm right here.
Oh, there you are.
Yes, there's another little island that I visited a long time ago, and the name of it is Anegada, and it's very flat. I think it's just an atoll. But anyway, I wondered how that island weathered this particular storm.
Anegada, the home of Calrec Beach.
Yes.
It's a beautiful
Right,
place.
right.
Yes, and gorgeous cruising grounds, and the world's largest reef, second to the Great Barrier. Anegada did much better, and just the angulation of wind direction, and they were up and going and operational much faster than Tortola and Virgin Gorda. Yeah.
The criminals. You said the prison got torn apart. What did the criminals do when they were free?
Amazing, they were stealing electric TVs. Go figure. You know, they had to implement a rule that if we could get a ferry off one way, if you didn't have a receipt, you weren't allowed to bring large electronics off island. So they were optimistic that one day they'd get to use those TVs, I guess. But they did recapture them all. The military helped. Some of them turned themselves in because where were they going to go ultimately?
How was Tortola improved or strengthened by these hurricanes?
Well, they know a lot more. The BVI disaster department has actually just launched an app so we can get news and information quickly. Hopefully they've strengthened the, there's always a need for greater and stronger, faster telecoms, and I'm sure that's still not back enough, not certainly by 4 or 5G standards. Building standards are going to change. There's a stronger sense of community. Like many of us who've been through earthquakes and fire disasters, where were you when, right? It bonds everybody.
So if another hurricane was coming in 2 weeks, what supplies would you add or now stash?
Besides my VHF radio and my tracker.
Well, those included. Okay, VHS
Right.
radio, a tracker. Now, when you say tracker, describe what you mean by
It's
tracker.
an inReach tracker. I've used it for offshore. Garmin owns it now. It was developed by DeLorme. It's a device that allows anybody who wants to track my movings. If I'm in a boat, to track the course of the boat, and allows me, mine is the next generation at that time from a few years ago that allows me to text and email to my heart's content. The old version just let people know you were safe.
So 3 key lessons learned for you.
The level of resilience that I have in me means that I never have to feel unsafe again. And giving myself the gift of community, that I would never weather an experience like this or any other that feels of that kind of proportion without a community. And really just knowing that I can get the resources. I don't have to be afraid of not having what I need, because even despite the mistakes I made, I was still able to get my needs met, to learn and develop resources and be of service to my community, which is most important to me.
Wonderful. Christine, thank you so much for sharing. This has been another visit with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our speaker today, Christine Perakis, is a lawyer, a business coach, a 100-ton license holder, and a hurricane survivor. Thank you so much, Christine Perakis. And with that, the luncheon is adjourned.